10 years ago, I made a documentary called Convinced, and the tagline for the film was, "Why would anyone become Catholic?" That's because at the time, converting was so out of the norm. But today, something has changed.
A new report says the Catholic Church in the United States appears to be entering a period of renewed growth.
More and more Americans are converting to the Roman Catholic faith.
U.S. Catholic dioceses are reporting a surge in converts across the country.
Certain dioceses are reporting increases of 30%, 40%, even 50%.
So what's going on here? Who are these new converts? Is the movement widespread or only in certain parishes? And what kind of disciples is it producing? Well, this summer I set off around the country to find out. We drove over 10,000 miles through 24 states, talking to converts, priests, OCIA leaders, school teachers and administrators, religious sisters, college professors, and many more. And what I found is a story that is both more interesting and more nuanced than first meets the eye. Are there signs of revival and reasons for hope? Absolutely. We have some amazing stories to share on this channel over the next few months. But we did see a few things that are interesting. For one, this isn't a movement that is evenly distributed across all age groups. This revival seems to be focused on younger generations.
Previous time, they kept the record. The demographic was, I think, 25 to 45-year-olds, those received in the church. This time, it was 19 to 25-year-olds. So the young people are coming in droves.
Every year we have a larger group of coming into the church at Easter, coming through our OCIA program, and we find that the young families and the young people are flocking here. The church is packed.
When people ask me, where do I find hope in the culture? Where do I see those sparks of possibility? I say, look to our young adults, look to the young people. When you look at a ministry like Focus, the Fellowship of Catholic University Students, and they're exploding in the number of campuses they serve. We're in the Arlington Catholic Diocese in Virginia. We just ordained 12 priests in our diocese, and to see these young men on fire for serving the Lord gives me hope. When I see the young vocations, my daughter's vocation, and other young women who are entering religious life, that gives me great hope. Our diocese just did a work camp where they had hundreds and hundreds of young people going out and serving the poor and the needy, and that example of the love of Christ, how that impacts the people that they serve. I see great hope. So the pro-life movement is seeing more people coming in that are young and on fire. The church is seeing more people young and on fire. And I think that bodes incredibly well. That's really not even anymore the future of the church and our culture. This is the here and the now. It's the young people that are driving our church forward, and it gives me great hope.
And another interesting fact is that for a generation that jumps on micro trends in fashion and on social media, the young people that are entering the church aren't attracted to the new and innovative. They want conservative, traditional Catholicism.
When they come to the Catholic Church, they don't want 1970s folk music, okay? They don't want what I call Father Fabulous and Sister Sandals, okay? They don't want that version of Catholicism. They want Catholicism which looks Catholic, which feels Catholic, and is rooted in 2,000 years of tradition.
We've grown up in a time of a lot of confusion and a lot of individualism, a lot of kind of me. And there's something deeply moving to me about knowing when I go to the traditional Mass that for all intents and purposes, this is the same Mass that my patron saint went to.
That these young people know there's something very badly wrong with the world in which we're living for all sorts of manifold reasons. And they're looking for something which is more centered with something more real. And they're finding in the Catholic Church.
I just suggested to Daisy at dinner, like, don't you feel like we're kind of like not quite there? And I was, I know you've written off Catholicism because you feel like it's so distant, or you have to be born Catholic or whatever. But what if we tried? I didn't know what I was getting myself into saying that. We talked about it. We were like positive. We went to a Mass and loved that first Mass. We went to a different Mass at St. Peter and Paul where we now go. We're like, oh, wow, this is pretty moving. When we went to the Latin Mass, we were like, oh, this is real. This is different. It really, really emphasizes the historical reality of the church.
They're living in a fast-paced, chaotic world which doesn't seem to have any anchors, doesn't have any restraints at all. And therefore, they're looking for restraints, they're looking for channeling, they're looking for something that has deep roots. And the Catholic Church offers that.
What they're not looking for is Christianity in water, as C.S. Lewis would say. We don't want modernism.
Even when I was like not Christian and trans-identified, I was like, progressive Christianity doesn't make sense. I was searching for clarity, like desperately, and I found that in the Catholic Church.
I genuinely think that Gen Z lives in a cheap world. Everything's cheap. Our food is poisonous, our clothes are cheap, everything is just cheap. And it does communicate something to our souls, what we experience with our bodies. And so I feel like a lot of Gen Z are rediscovering the traditional Latin Mass, or very reverent Novus Ordos, one of the two. And they're like, I've been cheated. Like, there have been so many Gen Zers who have emailed me saying, I feel cheated. I feel like I've been kept from something so amazing, so beautiful. And for what? Because, oh, guitars are better? And they feel like they just missed out on something that their soul was hungry for. They long for something with depth. They long for something that is not watered down, that isn't surface level.
They're looking for something which has deep roots, liturgically, musically, culturally, educationally, and that's why the classical school movement is taking off. That's why traditional worship is taking off. That's why the Catholic Church is taking off.
Now you might think that everyone would be happy about this and doing their best to support what is working. But no. Indeed, there's a battle going on within the church, and often the people with the most decision-making authority are working to suppress these new movements.
So we're finding that the church is packed. We're finding that the school is overflowing. We're having a waiting list in the school. And I'm saying this is what's happening right now, okay? The young people are interested in Catholic education, classical Catholic education, traditional liturgy. They're coming to us and saying, we want marriage, we want family life, we want children, we want to do all the things which the Catholic Church should be saying, yes, this is exactly what you should be doing. And we find that members of the hierarchy and members of the older generation are saying, no, stop that, obstacles put up, we're going to suppress that, we're going to push that to one side, we're going to marginalize that. No, what you really want is, let me tell you what you really want. You want 70s music with your granddad playing a guitar somewhere, okay? You know, to my mind, this is absolute madness. Why is so much of the church leadership threatened by this? Okay, they seem to be suppressing the traditional movement. They seem to be unenthusiastic about traditional schools. We had to overcome every obstacle put in our way to try to open up our upper school, our little upper school. Okay, why all the obstacles? Why the lack of funding? Why pushing us to the margins? I'm hopeful with Pope Leo that things are going to change and that gradually we're going to see a transition. But some of the signs in the American church are still pretty depressing.
As Chesterton would say, we don't want a church that will move with the world, we want a church that will move the world. That these young people know there's something very badly wrong with the world in which we're living for all sorts of manifold reasons. And they're looking for something which is more centered with something more real. And they're finding in the Catholic Church. And that's the authentic, authoritative, orthodox Catholic Church. And we need church leaders with the courage to recognize that, which means, of course, having the courage to stand up to the zeitgeist, the toxic mainstream, because it's going to cause, of course, the church becoming more seen as the authentic alternative and the authentic opposition to radical secularism and radical relativism.
Also, it should be noted that the progressives are still out there working, and likely in much greater numbers than the conservatives.
So the church I reverted, where I reverted, I was a part of the youth group there. They kind of took me under their wing for a little bit. But the youth group was very anti-Catholic, despite the fact being Catholic. It's very odd. So there was a trans person there. When we went on retreats and things, stay in the girls' cabins. Yeah, and he was allowed to shower with the girls, not in bathing suits, of course, but still things that are not appropriate, obviously. And that kind of started my disenchantment with the group, where then later on, we were going to go meditate with some monks, and I was just like, oh, that's awesome. Like, meditating with monks, what could go wrong there? Like, Benedictine monks, whatever. And I'm like, so where are they? Like, we have to drive into the country. That's usually where they are. And they're like, oh, they're down the street. And I was like, down the street? I was like, down the street? I was like, okay, well, sure, whatever. Buddhist monks. Our outing was with Buddhist monks meditating on Buddha or something. I didn't pay attention. I didn't do it. I was like, this is stupid. So I didn't do it. And the spiritual like oppression there was just awful. I was like, this is crazy. So then that was strike 2, which you'd think that strike 1 was enough, but I was a very forgiving person, and unfortunately. And then strike 3 came in like a bout of like just a tidal wave. We sat down with a priest who I didn't know was the priest because he was wearing the most dad outfit I'd ever seen in my life. Cut off cargo shorts, button down short sleeve shirt with long, socks on and like gym shoes. He sits down and I was just like, oh, somebody's dad's here. And it's like, oh no, I'm father so-and-so. And I'm just like, where's your collar? I'm like, who are you? Anyways, and the first thing that came out of his mouth when everybody gathered around him was, so kids, what do you guys want to change about the Catholic Church? And I was like, excuse me? Hello? And, the top 3 things that people said were, oh, we want condoms passed out before Mass or after Mass or whatever, like available to us. We want female priests, like that was another big one. And then, I forget what the last one was, but they were all basically very anti-Catholic, very liberal ideals. And I was just like, I can't do this, and so I ended up leaving that group.
So who's going to be victorious in this struggle? What is the future of the Catholic Church in America? And what can we do to help things go in the right direction? Those are the questions I'm exploring with my new film project. My goal is to put these stories together in a feature-length documentary that will help equip us to fight the good fight. But let me be blunt for a second. I need your help. Simply put, we need more funds to finish the interviews, do post-production, and distribute the movie. As the story has gotten bigger, so has the budget needed to get it done. Inflation hasn't helped us either. Would you consider making a tax-deductible donation to help tell this story? You can do so by clicking the link provided. Thank you in advance for your financial support, and thank you for your prayers and continued support of this channel. We'll see you next time.